And thanks for being with us now on this Friday evening, February 3rd, as we recap what happened in the courtroom today in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. The disgraced attorney accused of shooting and killing his wife Maggie and son Paul in June of 2021. After we go over today's testimony, we're going to be joined by two criminal defense attorneys for their take on the very latest developments. But let's get to the courtroom. We begin with some long-awaited testimony today. Forensic examiner Paul Greer, he is with SLED. Greer gave lengthy explanations to jurors about how he is able to determine if a bullet or cartridge had been fired or ejected by a specific gun. He was tasked with analyzing guns and ammo collected at the Murdaugh home, and including shell casings found near the victims and near the family's gun room.
Items 35 through 39.
So the items collected around Margaret Murdaugh's body matched the items collected outside the house, which matched items that were collected in the field at the shooting range.
Yes, sir. I was able to identify that the cartridge cases recovered, items 2 through 7 near the body, did have matching mechanism marks with several of the items from the area around the home and those in the shooting field, and several of those in the shooting field, to conclude that some of those had been, that those had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
And during cross-examination, the defense made it clear that Greer is not identifying a specific gun as the one that was used in either murder.
You cannot, and you did not, and you are not offering an opinion that item 22 shotgun was used to murder Paul Murdaugh, correct?
My result was inconclusive, and what that ultimately means is I'm not able to determine that. It's a possibility that it could have been fired by that shotgun, and it also could have been another firearm with similar characteristics.
Meaning it's just equally possible it wasn't that gun.
That's possible.
Well, several of today's witnesses took the stand without jurors present. That's because they were questioned about alleged financial crimes said to be committed by Alex Murdaugh. Judge Clifton Newman has not determined if he will allow jurors to hear about Murdaugh's financial legal troubles during the trial. That's expected perhaps sometime next week. Now, one of the witnesses on the stand today was Tony Satterfield. He is the son of Gloria Satterfield, Murdaugh's housekeeper, who died in February of 2018. She fell and hit her head at the home and lived for a few weeks before dying. She was never able to tell Tony what happened that day. Satterfield testified that Alex Murdaugh told him he was going to go after his insurance money to get Gloria's medical bills paid. Satterfield explained to prosecutor Creighton Waters that Murdaugh told him he would get $100,000 each for Tony and his brother. While waiting for their case to be resolved, Satterfield said he heard from media reports that there had been a settlement.
Ultimately, in the wake of all of this, you've come to find out that there was a settlement for $505,000, correct?
Yes.
And it was diverted by Alex Murdaugh, correct?
Yes.
And ultimately, you've come to find out that there was a settlement under the umbrella policy for $3.8 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or thereabouts, correct?
Yes.
And a large proportion of that was diverted by Alex Murdaugh. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever get 1 cent from Alex Murdaugh when he was still, before all of this happened?
No.
And it took, after this happening, and it took a legal process for that to happen. Is that right?
Yes.
And ultimately, is it your understanding that he confessed judgment to taking money for both of those? Is that
Yes.
right?
Under cross-examination, Satterfield was asked when he called Murdaugh to ask about the settlement. He was unable to remember if it was before or after the June 7th shooting deaths. Another witness to speak to the judge today without the jury in the room, Jan Malinowski. He gave more testimony about the alleged financial crimes of Murdaugh. Malinowski is the CEO and president of Palmetto State Bank. He took over after former CEO Russell Lafitte was fired for financial fraud allegations linked to Murdaugh. Prosecutors want jurors to hear his testimony to help establish a financial motive for the murders.
On August 9th, Norris Lafitte, a board member, sent an email to members of the executive committee and the board asking for a full accounting of Mr. Murdaugh's relationship with the bank.
It's fair to say that of June 2021 and the months after, the indebtedness to Palmetto State Bank from Alex Murdaugh was very, very large.
Yes, sir.
And it's fair to say it also had charged off loans in the past, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If it had come out at any particular time from, let's say, 2010 on up to June of 2021, or at any time, that Alex Murdaugh had been stealing money from his partners or stealing money from his clients, would this bank have continued to loan him money?
No, sir.
You may recall last November, Russell Lafitte was convicted of 6 counts of wire and bank fraud. All right, we're being joined now by 2 legal experts for their takes on today's developments. We have Luke and Brian Shealy. Guys, you were with us earlier in the week. We appreciate you coming back.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk about the testimony from Greer today. The SLED agent talking about able to identify the shell casings at the crime scene, identifying them as finding other shell casings on Murdaugh's property, most likely coming from the same gun. What do you guys take on that?
Well, expert Greer is a very damaging witness, very helpful for the state. He testifies to some very fascinating things in that, well, number one, he has the one Blackout 300 rifle in evidence. Now, I don't think the state's trying to say that that's the gun. They test fire that against shell casings. It's inconclusive. If it were a match, he would have said it's a match. But what's really damaging for the defense, and something they tried to keep out altogether, was that they took those 6 shell casings around Miss Murdaugh's body and they compared it to other shell casings found amongst the property, specifically at the side of the house where I think it was young man Mr. Loving said he was test firing the replacement rifle, and also other shell casings at the gun range, so to speak. And they didn't say that they matched in terms of test fire, but it was mechanical marks from cycling through and ejecting, not being fired, that match essentially the bullets around, or the casings around Miss Murdaugh, which means it's not a stranger gun, it's a Murdaugh family Blackout 300 gun. And that's just a devastating blow to the defense, which is why they're desperately trying to attack the science of that and in a pretrial filing, keep it out altogether.
How does Dick Harpootli and how does Jim Griffin attack that, Brian?
It's going to be tough. And, you know, before Paul Greer's testimony, I was under the assumption, just based on the level of pre-trial legal analysis and kind of voir dire of this particular witness, that potentially the defense has their own firearms expert. But now the way Jim Griffin was cross-examining Mr. Greer and kind of just attacking the science altogether, it makes me think they don't have a firearms expert that they intend to use, and they really were just going to kind of discredit his base of knowledge, which is really tough to do on Mr. Greer.
Right. The defense already has a tough task right now because of a couple of things that happened earlier this week. The dog kennel video, in which 2 people said they heard Alex Murdaugh's voice on that dog kennel video, basically putting Alex Murdaugh at the crime scene minutes before those murders took place. How does the defense square this up with Murdaugh's story that he was napping at the home at the time and never went to the dog kennel?
Well, I think if you're in a case where you're not having to deal with all these unrelated financial crimes, then perhaps Mr. Murdaugh, who's a lawyer and is savvy, can get up there and do some splaining, so to speak. Say, look, you know, I'm gonna hold my hand up. I didn't exactly want to maybe tell you I was down there, but let me do some explaining and we can talk about it. And, oh yeah, I remember that, but it's very tough to do that. Number one, that's why you don't ever talk to police, regardless of your education, background, skill set, if you're potentially under investigation, because they have that inconsistency to call him a liar. But that defense is going to have to explain that. The problem is, if Judge Newman lets in all those crimes, he's going to get pounded with allegations on that, going to have to plead the fifth on every one of them, which is not a good look in front of the jury.
Brian, would the defense have an easier time explaining the change of clothes? That Snapchat video showed him wearing one thing. He was wearing something else later that night when police arrived on the property. I mean, he was out and about, I guess, on a farm that day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if he's prepared to testify, he would legitimately be able to say that maybe he took a shower before his nap or after, he changed clothes. He was working with Paul that day, looking at trees on the property. And there's a lot of different reasons to have change of clothes. Maybe he was going to change clothes before he went to see his mother. I mean, there are explainable things, but it is all in the light of him telling law enforcement that he wasn't at the kennel when two very credible witnesses, based on their testimony, said that's definitely his voice. So like I said, he's likely going to have to testify, but if the other crimes and the financial malfeasance comes in, he's going to be jammed.
Let's talk about that for just a moment, because that's been the focus of a lot of attention over the last couple of days. The judge, Judge Newman here, said he hasn't made a final decision on what he will and will not allow. He did agree with the prosecution that the defense did open the door for the financial crimes, the alleged financial crimes against Murdaugh to be presented as a possible motive in all of this. But let's say all of this that we've heard over the last couple of days is allowed in the testimony. How does that affect the trial, Luke?
He's done. Murdaugh's done if all those crimes come in. And it's a I don't mean that lightly. It's a very weighty decision for Judge Newman. He did say that the defense opened the door by a line of questioning they had, I think, on one of the friends of Paul.
Right.
And I can't say I disagree with him, but it's such a important decision that if this jury is tasked with trying this double murder case based on the facts and evidence here, not numerous terrible unrelated financial crimes. Yes, they have a right to establish a motive, the state does, and tell their story, but the defense makes a pretty good point. Well, this wasn't a distraction from his financial crimes. This put an international microscope on his life.
Right.
And I think I would submit that I don't think that they necessarily would have discovered the financial crimes had the killings not happened. I think they might have found a way to have him pay it back. I mean, this is a very prominent law firm. It was very embarrassing. So if it comes in, it's also an appellate issue. No one wants to try this case again if you can't help it. Everybody has a vested interest in trying a clean case. So Judge Newman's going to be thinking about that. But he's a strong-willed judge, and he's going to do what he thinks is right at the end of the day.
You agree with your brother on all of this?
Absolutely. I think he's done if it comes in. He couldn't effectively testify in his own defense because he will be grilled on other crimes and allegations that are pending. The jury will be done with him. I mean, for instance, the testimony of the Satterfield son was heart-wrenching today, and that is maybe one of the most credible witnesses we've heard all week. The way he talked about the trust that was lost, how he felt like Alec was his lawyer. Devastating. And my opinion is that kind of other crimes and acts testimony with pending charges should never come into this murder trial for it to be clean. But if it comes in, he'll have no answer for that.
Right. The alleged financial crimes are one thing. There is really right now, as far as I know, no physical evidence connecting Murdaugh to all of this. A lot of circumstantial evidence, which is not looking good for Murdaugh right now. Everything that's come out in court this week.
Right. I mean, we started off talking about this case as a circumstantial case, but it's a strong circumstantial case. And you heard the state in their opening discuss how a case can be circumstantial, but that doesn't mean it's any less important or somehow is less good evidence. It's more of an inference than like a direct confession or a direct ID. And it's the inference of the cover-up. They're going to say a created, manufactured alibi, the cleanness of his shirt, the missing weapons, the convenience of how he found them. All that is just ticking into beyond a reasonable doubt land, and plenty of cases has been won based on circumstantial. So that's the other thing. I don't know that they need the financial crimes. The financial crime evidence makes it a slam dunk, but does it make it a slam dunk conviction for the right and fair reasons? That's the other question. So it's still a very strong circumstantial case.
The lack of blood spatter in this case when it comes to Alex Murdaugh, something Dick Harpootlian touched on in court just yesterday, Brian. He was asking the SLED expert on the stand, did you find one speck of blood? Did you find this? Did you find that? And her answer was no. There was nothing inside the home as far as blood evidence is concerned in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And they have to hit that point hard. I mean, I think the state would, of course, if he were wearing a bloody shirt, he'd be guilty. The fact that he's too clean, guess what? He's guilty. So, I mean, that's going to be the state all day long. And Dick Harpootlian, for the past 2 weeks, has done a really good job of chipping away at the professionalism of the local law enforcement and even the SLED agents that are supposed to be some of the best law enforcement in the state. You know, would have either done things better than the locals did or didn't quite do things the right way. And so that is Dick Harpootlian's job as Mr. Murdaugh's defense lawyer and part of the team. But yeah, it's one of those things that either way you spin it, it can be spun.
Let's talk about next week now. Testimony is going to resume, I believe, on Monday morning around 9:30 or so. Of course, there's more alleged financial crime testimony that the judge is going to hear as well. But what's next here? The prosecution, the state, they've been laying out their case day by day by day, landing blow after blow after blow. Are there any more blows to land next week?
Certainly. We haven't heard from DNA yet. I don't know that it's going to be particularly earth-shattering one way or the other. I've never had a murder case where we don't hear from the pathologist. And again, there's mechanisms and causes of death. Particularly, a pathologist is well equipped to talk about distance, stippling, things of a scientific nature that can help describe how close the assailant might have been to the victim. So I would expect we would hear from a pathologist. They do tend to introduce a lot of pretty gory photos in that, which can overwhelm a jury. So I think the state is probably 2/3 of the way there, and then it's what do we do with the financial stuff? Does it come in or not? And if that comes in, we got a lot. That could be all next week.
And Luke, one thing we haven't mentioned is, and we were debating this earlier on today, the associate of Mr. Murdaugh who allegedly tried to help him commit suicide. So, evidence of suicide, is a powerful bit of evidence. It's been heavily litigated in South Carolina, but the state would often try to show a guilty conscience.
Right.
And that has not been part so far of these other bad acts, but it certainly would play a part here. And I imagine the state will be seeking to have that witness's testimony come in, and anything that Mr. Murdaugh said to that witness in conjunction with planning the attempt on his own life, any guilty words, any guilty acts, could certainly be used against Mr. Murdaugh.
I want to bring up something else about the alleged financial crimes here, something I heard the judge tell both sides in court. Basically, the state wants to present this evidence. The defense says it shouldn't be allowed. Okay, we get that. The state's got a long list of witnesses they want to present when it comes to this. The defense says, well, if you do that, it's going to add probably at least a couple of weeks onto this trial. We're going to be here till March or at least to the end of February. So the judge basically telling both sides, kind of work this out amongst yourself. Let's try to get some sort of agreement here. If you guys can't get to some sort of agreement on what we're going to do moving forward, I'll make that decision for you. And he said, I have no problem hearing that testimony. You guys think they're going to work something out, or is the judge going to make a ruling here?
I don't see any way that the defense can work something out on that issue that they've so heavily contested, because if they do, they essentially consent to it. They lose all right to appealing that particular issue. Judge Newman is very experienced, and it would pretty much evaporate any chance of appellate issues if they did work something out. So I think perhaps the judge is, for efficiency purposes, wanting that, and also for appellate reasons wanting that. I can't see any way that Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin agree to work something out. I think they've drawn a line in the sand. The state wants it in, they can't have it, and the judge will make a decision. It's either coming in or it's not, and I think he's going to let parts of it in, and then it's just, what does he let? Does he let the Satterfield portion in? Does he let the day of the killings confrontation by his law firm in, which might be perhaps the most relevant to what happened in his mind that day? So I think you'll be in a situation where the judge will be making that call.
And that is another blow that the prosecution landed just yesterday, Brian, when the woman from the law firm testifying that Murdaugh was confronted about that missing money on the morning of the murders, and as late as 4 o'clock in the afternoon that day, just 4 hours, 45 minutes before the slayings.
I mean, that is right. And she was a great witness. She was sharp, and she really kind of talked about the building momentum that the firm and the actions that they were going to take to confront Mr. Murdaugh. And she really helped the state's theory as well, if you're to believe their motive theory, that all of this killing was done to distract to buy more time for Alex Murdaugh, which I personally don't believe is
Okay, so my
a motive
financial
that
duties are
flies.
actually I have
But
people
what that
under
witness
me
did say is that
every day.
once his wife and his son were murdered, they backed off. They gave him time to grieve. And I think the state could make an appropriate inference that that was the goal, to give him time. So, but yeah, she was a real savvy witness.
Right. Depending on what financial evidence is permitted in this case, do you guys think the state rests their case next week or maybe the following week? Or is it really going to matter on what the judge decides as far as what he's going to allow in?
It really depends on the judge. I think he's going to be the one making the call. And if he lets anything and everything regarding financial crimes come in, then the state will plow right through that, and it could be all week next week just on financial crimes.
Right.
If he limits it very narrowly and says, for example, talk about the confrontation that day, and that's all you get to talk about, you know, bring in that in-house law firm accountant and a couple others to corroborate that, then that might add a day or two, and then we're still moving, where they'll probably finish next week. And maybe get into a defense case.
And that is the defense itself, Brian. I mean, other than Murdaugh taking the stand himself, they probably have a few witnesses to call on their own as well.
You would think they would have some witnesses to attack this. These are experienced trial lawyers. They've got a lot of resources. And if you're going to put up a case, often you want to be able to put up more than just your client. So we'll see.
All right. Luke, Brian, not Luke Bryan, but Luke and Brian Shealy. Guys, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Again, if you would like to watch that trial, it is going to resume Monday morning, 9:30. We're being told you can watch full coverage on WLTX Plus, on our YouTube page, and on WLTX.com. And of course, as always, we'll have live team coverage throughout all of next week right here on News 19. Hope you have a good weekend.